All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We're gonna start China today. We're gonna look at how the Chinese attempted to resist the West, the outside, the British, the Americans. So the first thing I need you to do, take a look at this. It's posted as well on Schoology. Read through these two paragraphs. Answer two questions on the bottom. Why might you seek out or resist foreign influence? So take a few minutes to go through that. And you're thinking about how might foreign products affect the quality of life in China, both positively and negatively, and what demands might foreigners make on countries they trade with. Okay, so I want you to think about those, post those answers to the discussion board. I'll have that posted, I'll read through that. And what I've been doing with discussion boards is each day that you provide answers, I'm putting it as participation grade. So depending on what the task is, will depend on the number of points. The two that you had last week were 5 points and 10 points each. So just keep doing that so you get your participation grade for the year, for the mark period, because it's going to be here before we know it, within like 2 or 3 weeks. So I want to keep that in mind as we go forward. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Again, just post these when you get a chance, please. Thank you. All right, some vocabulary we're going to talk about today. Extraterritorial rights. These are rights that exempt foreigners from a foreign country's laws. So imagine you are in China and you commit a crime. In China at this time, you would not be held to the laws of the Chinese people. Instead, you would be subject to the laws of America. Interesting, a couple months ago when we were talking about laws and things like that, I mentioned the guy, the teenager who was in Singapore. I watched a video on him the other night, actually. So he was in Singapore. The penalty was a $2,000 fine. He stole something, and he did graffiti on cars. So the penalty was a $2,000 fine, imprisonment, in addition to caning. So this boy, I think he was 20 years old. It was 6 lashes with a cane, and he was not subject to American law. He was in Singapore. He was a student there, so he was subject to the law of Singapore, and he was forced to pay a fine. He was put in jail, and he got the six lashes with the cane. Special economic zones we're going to talk about in a little while. Cities in China set up for foreign investment to limit foreign economies in China. They're mostly set up on the coast. So I want you to think about that. Why would a government want to set up business in China on the coast? The dynasty is the reign of a government over a group of people or land for an extended period of time. That's one's pretty easy. The open door policy is a declaration of free trading for all countries and Chinese ports. Talk about that. Trade deficit, country imports more than it exports, meaning that they're bringing in more goods than they're sending out. And a trade surplus is when a country sends out more than it brings in. So China, the country of China today would be a country with a large surplus. And yeah, there's my typo. They always are there, so I apologize for that. So China and the West. So when this all starts, the Chinese look down on foreigners. They look down on foreign goods. They look down on their inventions. They look down on their new products, clocks, music. They wanted their own stuff. So they refused to trade with the West because they wanted to be self-sufficient. Okay, we've talked about self-sufficiency all year, the ability for one country to be able to do for themselves, or a village to be able to do for themselves. I ask you guys all the time, are you self-sufficient? So this really included all countries with the exception of a few. Spain and Portugal had arrived in China earlier than the other countries, and they brought with them different crops from the Caribbean that would be used as food. Maize, sweet potatoes, and peanuts are just some examples of that. So the Spanish and the Portuguese were welcomed in China at this time. So the European merchants, they got to think of something. Well, China, much like India, when we talk about India, they have this vast population with all these people. So what do? Okay, we got to get something in there that they want from us. Okay, they don't want our inventions. They already got food coming from other countries. We got to get something. And the British, okay, because remember the sun never sets on the British Empire, they have stuff available that they can use in large quantities, okay? And they're going to get that product from India, okay? So what the British do is they are going to smuggle in to China opium. Now, opium is a habit-forming narcotic. It's highly addictive, okay? They're going to bring it into China illegally. Now, it's interesting here because in Britain, opium is illegal. In China, it's illegal. But the British need something that is going to allow them to get in to China. Okay, so they start this in the late 1700s. By 1835, they have about 12 million people addicted to opium. So the Empress goes to her ambassador and says, listen, like, we can't have this stuff here. We can't have this. Okay, we need to write a letter to the Queen Victoria of Britain, say, listen, you got to stop this. Our people are addicted to this product. You don't even allow it in your country. Why do we have it in our country? So she writes this letter, please stop sending opium to China illegally. And the British are basically like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Okay, we want to be in your country, and you're not letting us in. So this is the only way we can get access. So we're going to keep doing it. So the British refuse, and the British and the Chinese are going to go to war, the Opium War. Okay, it's a war fought over a product. Okay, and this war is going to start in 1839, and it's going to go till 1842. And after the British defeat the Chinese, they are going to force the Chinese to sign the Treaty of Nanking. In your book, you might see Nanjing, but it's Nanking. So 2 years later, they signed another treaty. And this other treaty is signed in 1844, and it's going to give the United States and other foreign citizens the ability to trade in China, and it also gives them those extraterritorial rights that we mentioned before. So these foreigners that arrive in China to trade are not going to be subject to Chinese law. So initially they open up 4 ports, all on the coast, obviously, for trade. And they are not going to be subject to Chinese law. So they can violate any type of law that they want. They can sell legal products, but they will not be subject to Chinese law. They are subject to the law of their own country. Therefore, they won't be given the same punishments in China that the natives would receive. So obviously, it would make sense that the natives would look down at these foreigners coming in and trading and not obeying their laws. Okay. So one of these areas that I want to talk to you about is Hong Kong. I'm sure you've all heard of Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been in the news a lot. In the fall, it was in the news. The student protesters rebelling over the government, the Chinese government. So England received the island of Hong Kong as a result of the Treaty of Nanking. So they received the land in 1842, and they got to keep that land until July 1st, 1997. Now, I was a kid when that happened, with the turnover. I remember it was like a big celebration, almost like a New Year's Eve type thing, where people were gathered in the streets celebrating the transfer of power from the British back to the Chinese. Okay, Hong Kong is one of the largest, most prosperous economic centers in the world. Okay, think about almost as Asia's version of New York City. Okay, they got everything there. Businesses are all there. They have their stock market in there, things like that. So it's really a big deal that 23 years ago, China got this land back. So these special economic zones that they're called form throughout China that are going to allow foreign countries the ability to trade and invest in China. So what does a special economic zone look like? So these areas allow foreigners and foreign companies access to China, where the government of China really doesn't get involved with what happens there. So these businesses are kind of free to operate on their own. And this is going to be done to help those businesses gain more consumers and gain more wealth. Most of these economic zones are located on the coast. I want you to think about that for a second. Why would they have these economic zones in the coast? Especially going into the the mid 1800s. It's a little bit different today, but think about why that might happen. That they would want them on the coast. So the hope in these areas was that China would gain significant foreign investment. They are going to use these foreign countries and these foreign businesses to pump money into these cities, building up the cities at the expense of the foreign country or the foreign business. So there are a lot of American companies that do big business in China, okay? IBM, Apple, they invest heavily, okay, in these special economic zones. And over the years, okay, we're going to talk about 1840s, in the 1980s, they increased, okay, and they kept adding these special economic zones. So again, think about why would China's government want these zones, these cities, where a foreign country or foreign businesses could come in and invest, okay? And if you really think about it, well, why should we pay for it if somebody else is going to build it up? Okay, so you have these thriving cities in China. So just, if you want to wrap your head around this for a second, China has 160 cities with over 1 million people. 160. Okay, they have 13 cities where there's over 10 million people. Okay, the United States has 0 with 10 million people. Okay, as a country, we have 11 cities with 1 million people. Okay, China has 13 with 10. So just think about that population. Okay, you're talking about a population currently of about 1.45 million people. We have, at most different counts, we'll find out this year because the census is going out, about 340 at most people. Those 11 cities that we have are New York, obviously, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Phoenix, Dallas, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, San Jose, and Austin. Jacksonville is the next closest to make it 12. They're about 80,000 people away. That's not a lot, okay, of these large cities compared to what a country like China has today. All right, so moving forward, so we're talking about 1850. They have a population of 430 million people. Okay, 170 years ago, their population is 100 million people more than we have today. And their population is just growing and growing and growing 170 years ago. But while their population is going up, the one thing that's not going up is their food production. Okay, they constantly don't have enough food. So as a result, you have this increase in hunger. You have opium addictions going up because they lost the war. So the Chinese are going to rebel. And this is known as the Taiping Rebellion. Okay, the people rebelling against the emperor. Okay, so this rise of this rebellious group starts in 1830, even before the Opium Wars fought. Okay, and I'm going to butcher the name, so I apologize. Hong Xiquan, okay, is going to use peasants for his army. He's going to have an army of 1 million people. Okay, and this army is going to fight through the southeastern part of China, and they're going to gain control of different areas, and they're going to call Nanjing or Nanking their capital by 1853. So you're talking about 20 years of fighting, internal fighting in China. Okay, so just building, okay, this building towards an overthrow of the government. Okay, but eventually, Hong is going to withdraw from his position of power, and he's going to put his family in power. Now, we think back to the French Revolution. Napoleon's in power, and he puts his brothers and his other family members in different positions of power. And what happens to those places? They all fall. Okay, because they're not capable of ruling in the same way. Okay, so by 1864, the Taiping government is brought down because of the internal fighting of the people that he puts in power. Okay, and because of outside influence, okay, trying to take over. Right, so this is a 35 years almost of this rebellion that ultimately unsuccessful, right? Oops, sorry. Okay, so let's look at some more stuff with the foreigners, okay? Because that's really what kind of makes China become more modern is the influence of foreign powers. Okay, so China has both internal and external pressures to fix their government, right? You have people that are hungry, you have this addiction to opium. They need to fix what's happening in their country. They also have the fighting going on, okay, for the Taiping Rebellion, okay? And then the West just wants in, they want to trade, okay? So they have to fix both what's happening in their country and what's happening outside their country, okay? So other powers are going to take advantage of China in this time of struggle, okay, and they're going to gain spheres of influence throughout the country, okay? But there's America, okay? We always got to be involved, right? So America is worried that these other countries are going to eventually take control of China and then shut us out, okay? And we're America, we don't get shut out of stuff like that, right? So we need to get involved. So in 1899, the United States declares what's called the open door policy, and that was in the vocabulary terms, okay? And this is going to open trade to all nations in China. Who's going to stand to benefit the most? You guessed it, the United States. Okay, so this protects the United States, their trading rights, and their ability to kind of colonize China in a way. But it really, from American perspective, it prevents other countries from going in and taking over China because remember with the British in India, why were they so interested in India and then later in China? Because there's so many people. You want to be able to sell your stuff to these people. Okay, we're coming up to the end here. So nationalism is going to start in China, and the idea of nationalism, this idea of individual pride. Okay, you don't want to be controlled or be told what to do by foreigners, right? So China is going to call for reforms, okay, because they're losing a lot of influence in their own country. Okay, they have all these failed attempts. Okay, the peasants want to have more of a say, so they form their own group, okay, to fight against the government, okay, and another one of these trying to overthrow the government, and this group is called the Society of Harmonious Fist, or the Boxers, okay. Now, the West calls them the Boxers because in training they did exercises that made them look like they were boxers. Okay, think about Floyd Mayweather or Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, and they did these exercises, and the boxers believed that they would be impervious to bullets. Okay, they thought they were like Superman. Okay, so they're going to go and fight people with minimal weapons and think that they're going to be able to win. So, okay. Obviously, this idea of them defeating the West is not going to work, right? So in August of 1900, okay, troops from all over are going to defeat the Boxers in a siege that lasts for a few months. We're talking about now 70 years where they're trying to do all these changes, different groups trying to take power, and nothing's really sticking. They've been defeated by everybody. So they need these big time changes, right? So the Empress, she is going to send her officials all over the world to study different governments and what different governments do in terms of their military, in terms of their schools, their constitution. They're going to try to find the best from everybody, and they are going to come back and brainstorm. Okay, so this starts in about 1900. 1906, everybody comes back, they meet, and they are going to take these different things to form their own government. Okay? Most importantly, they take they're going to set their government up like a constitutional monarchy like they have in Japan. So you have a emperor, or king or queen, and then you also have the laws of the constitution that must be followed, where you can have an elected by like a parliament or something like that. And they're going to have a full constitutional government by 1917. Okay, so 1917 is kind of where you get the formation of China. Obviously down the line, and we're not really going to get into this now, you'll talk about it again, I believe, when you're juniors, kind of how China changed and starts to develop those communist ideas. And brings about kind of what we're looking at today with China. Okay, So if you guys have any questions, please either email me or put them on the discussion board. Continue to stay safe, stay healthy, don't go crazy in your house, find something to do that you enjoy, and hope we'll see you soon. Take care.